Hi there, thanks for joining us for this Tribal Vault education video on the checklist templates in the Ant Farm library. This is part one of a three-part series on the checklist templates. In this segment, we'll review the structure and functionality of the checklist templates. In subsequent segments, we'll review the different types of checklist templates in the library and how to create your own templates. Checklists are a key part of your knowledge management strategy. They represent a quick and easy way to capture tribal knowledge so procedures can become repeatable. The most obvious benefit of checklists is in mistake prevention. They help you to avoid missing steps and thus avoid rework and service failures. Checklists are also a tool for documenting results. However, in addition to indicating the status for each task, you must be able to document exceptions and other notes that arise as you complete the procedure. Finally, the notion of a checklist applies in different contexts. For example, completing an audit versus performing a technical procedure. The checklist layout can vary based on this context. We'll cover the different types of checklists available in your Tribal Vault in part two of this series. This is the Tribal Vault home screen that you're all familiar with, and at the top of our recently accessed list, we've got a checklist to work with. I'll open it now. This checklist is actually the device installation checklist template from the All-In library. There are a growing number of templates where we've used the standard checklist templates to create blueprint-specific checklists in the Tribal Vault. Let's take a tour of the checklist layout. At the top of all of our checklist templates is a heading space. What's included here depends on the type of checklist. Where it makes sense, we've incorporated mfiles tags to import data from the properties in the checklist object. You can overwrite any of these. For example, here the company, Gaucho Enterprises, is pulled in from the checklist object, and here you can see the mfiles tag that brings it in. Check out our Introduction to Templates video for more information about inserting mfiles properties into your documents. Depending on the type of checklist, we've included summary scorecards that depict completion status. The content of these scorecards varies, whether it's an audit checklist, for example, or in this case, a technical procedure. We've also included the ability to get a little bit more screen real estate. These hide and display buttons at the top of the screen hide the settings so you get a little bit more room for the checklist. And then you can display it again. We'll keep it hidden for now. Columns you see on the checklist will depend upon the type of the checklist. Here we'll go through the standard checklist columns. The item number is automatically calculated, and it gives you a sequential index for each of the tasks in the checklist. The checklist item column is where you'll have a description of the task to perform. The title of this column varies based on the context of the checklist again. An audit checklist, this is the specification for what to check and how to check it, for example. Status column gives you a current state of the item or the entry. The choices here vary, again, depending on the nature of the checklist. So since this is a technical procedure, we have the options for completed, in progress, scheduled, and so forth. You can change the text in these entries. I'll show you how to do that in a second. The notes column gives you an opportunity to enter notes on the completion of the particular task. Were there any issues? Are there any other specifics to note about the task? And as you can see here, this may be the place for you to make references to job aids or templates or forms or other reference documents that are used to complete this task. And finally, the completion date and completed by are for your use to either document, record who completed the task and when, or in this example, perhaps provide a suggestion as to who should be working on this task, the project coordinator in this case. I mentioned that you have the ability to change the text in the drop-down status list. That's done on the Setup tab here. Here are the list of item status choices, and these entries in this orange color are those where you can change the text. You can change these to match your needs. I'd recommend that you keep with the general notion of the original label. So for example, you might use the term problem instead of issue here. So let's go back and look at how the particular statuses are represented. For example, this task might be completed, where this task might have an issue. If I look at the scorecard, you can see I'm beginning to fill out the task status in this scorecard. Those items that are marked as not applicable, it's one of the status choices, are not included in the total items here in the scorecard. We've looked at checklist columns. Now let's look at the checklist rows. There are two basic row configurations, section headings and checklist items. This sort of blue-gray row here, visit scheduling, is one of the section headings. They help to visually separate areas of the checklist, for example, preparation, completion of the procedure, and follow-up. Heading rows don't include any statuses, and there are actually 4 different types of headings you can get using a promote-demote capability that we'll talk about in just a minute. Checklist item rows are where the action happens. Each row is a task to complete. We've added macros that provide a capability to add and manipulate rows. They're executed through buttons and shortcut keys. Let's take a look at the buttons first. They're arrayed across the top here. For the most part, the functionality is as you would expect. Let's add a heading, and we'll put it down here. You can type over the insert heading here, obviously, with yours. So let's call it visit confirmation. And I can move it up and down as needed. Let's add a checklist item. It's the insert item button here. Maybe before departing the office or home on the way out to the client, we're going to check in with the client to confirm the visit. You can display and hide sections. For example, maybe I've completed the visit scheduling section and I want to get it out of the way. I can hide it. And then I can display it again, where the hide button works on any of the rows within that section. The display button only works when you have selected a heading row. There's the delete row button here. Maybe I made a mistake and I want to delete this row. It'll give you a little confirmation window. We'll leave that row in there for now. And the last button to talk about, the last macro to talk about, is the spell check. This runs the standard Windows spell check on the checklist range. That's all the heading rows and all the checklist items. It'll bring up misspellings or items it doesn't find in the dictionary. So in this case, the word device is misspelled. We'll correct it. I mentioned that the macro functionality is available both through buttons and through keyboard shortcuts. In all of our checklists, there'll be a shortcut keys button at the top here. You can click on that. It'll bring up this little explanation of the available shortcut keys. And when you click OK, those shortcuts will be available. And we're going to walk through them in just a minute. All of the shortcut keys are preceded by the Control plus Shift keys pressed together. So it's Control plus Shift plus an action key. This reference is available in your Tribal Vault to give you a graphic indication of the choices for the shortcut keys. You can find it simply by searching for checklist keyboard shortcuts. So let's look at how the keyboard shortcuts function. For example, move row up and move row down. Just simply Control Shift up arrow and Control Shift down arrow. I can insert items and delete rows as well. The insert item key is Control Shift insert, and the delete key is Control Shift delete. As I mentioned, you can only insert items through shortcut keys, not heading rows. However, the delete function in shortcut keys works on both headers and items. One capability that's available in keyboard shortcuts but is not available through the macro buttons is the ability to promote and demote rows. Let's see what that looks like for a header. For headers, you actually cycle through 4 stages. Control-Shift right arrow demotes the gray-blue header to a tan subheader. Control-Shift right once more makes it a milestone, perhaps someplace where you've reached a key point. And Control-Shift once more takes you to the fourth element in a cycle, an event, and maybe this is a trigger for the next activity. So you can see our example checklist here. There's a milestone that the on-site installation visit has been scheduled, and an event that means that the following task take place on the day of the scheduled on-site installation. Let's promote this back out, Control-Shift left arrow 3 times, gets me back to the main header. If I look at checklist items and form the same shortcut keys, Control-Shift right arrow begins to indent the item and add bullets. At the third demotion, you get to a row that's 3 bullets deep. This allows you to create sub-bullets, sub-task, if you will. Note that there is no parent-child relationship created between what might be a parent task on the list and these bulleted subtasks. And if I do Control-Shift left, it takes it back out to the main task. There are also shortcut keys to show and hide the sections. To hide a section, for example, again, this visit scheduling section is Control-Shift close bracket. And to display the section again is Control-Shift open bracket. Available in shortcut keys, but not in macro buttons, is the ability to hide all the sections. That's simply Control-Shift minus at the top of your keyboard to hide them, and Control-Shift plus, again, the plus T at the top of your keyboard to display all the sections. There's one more capability to touch on, and that's the ability to add some sort of a conditional requirement on a task. Sometimes the need to complete a task is dependent upon something. It might be if required in some circumstance. So, for example, you only need to verify that the last backup was good if, when I'm installing a device, I'm replacing an existing device and I might need that data. So the conditional here is if the device is being replaced. And likewise, if a device is being replaced but the backup wasn't successful, then I need to coordinate resolution of backup issues, so there's a second conditional. You add conditionals with the shortcut key Control-Shift greater than. Let's go down to this task that's obtain badges and cards, and maybe that's only required for some customers. So we'll add a conditional statement to that task. It's Control-Shift greater than. You get a little pop-up window where you enter that text, and maybe in this case it's if required for access. You don't need the parentheses, they'll be added. So now we're only going to worry about this task of obtaining badges and cards if for this particular client it's required for access. I can remove the conditionals just by reversing them out. It's Control-Shift less than. You'll get a little confirmation window and the conditionals removed. This completes our discussion of the macros and the keyboard shortcuts we've incorporated into the checklist templates. I'm going to save this checklist and check it into the Tribal Vault now. And here it is back where we started. If I want to get a look at the checklist, I can click on the preview pane. This uses the Windows Previewer function to get an indication of the contents of a file. It doesn't necessarily show you the exact layout as it is in the native Windows application. This concludes part 1 of our tutorial on checklist templates in the Tribal Vault. In this segment, we reviewed the structure and functionality of checklist templates. Be sure to review parts 2 and 3 of the checklist template series, where we'll go over the different types of checklist templates in the mFarm library and how to create your own checklist templates. Thanks for joining us.